The Dalton Highway, Alaska's most isolated road, where truckers vanish without a trace. What happens when experienced drivers encounter things that defy explanation in the frozen darkness? Welcome to Dark Fears. Tonight, we're sharing 10 disturbing trucker experiences from Alaska's deadliest routes. For privacy, names and identifying details have been altered, but these stories are 100% real accounts from those who live them. Have you ever driven through Alaska at night? What's the strangest thing you've witnessed on a lonely highway? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. If these stories disturb you, hit subscribe. We post new horror content every day. Let's begin. The Frozen Passenger. Have you ever wondered what happens on a highway where there are no towns for hundreds of miles? No cell phone signal, and only darkness pressing against both sides of your truck? The Dalton Highway in Alaska is one of those places. 414 miles of frozen isolation. Truckers say if your engine dies here, the cold can kill you before help arrives. Mark, an experienced ice road trucker, was hauling fuel north at 2:37 a.m. Outside, the temperature was minus 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow hit the windshield like needles. His eyes were fixed on the road when suddenly, the truck ABS indicator flashed. He slowed down, and that's when he saw it. A man, standing in the middle of the highway. No reflective gear, no vehicle, no tire tracks. Just a figure, motionless, staring at him. Mark grabbed the CB radio. Possible person on the road near mile marker 178. Anyone else see this? Dead silence. When his headlights fully illuminated the figure, Mark felt his heart stop. It wasn't a man. It was an emaciated, gray-faced thing. Mouth open unnaturally wide, like its jaw unhinged. Its eyes did not blink. The pupils reflected light like an animal. Mark accelerated, swerving around it. The side mirror caught a glimpse. The figure turned its head and smiled. And then, the radio crackled with a whisper. Why didn't you stop? The deeper you drive into Alaska, the more you learn one rule. Never switch your radio to channel 19 after midnight. Trucker radio channels are usually full of jokes, weather updates, and warnings about road ice. But every veteran driver knows channel 19 is different. Nobody admits it, but everyone has heard something on that frequency. Eli was on a routine fuel delivery to Dead Horse. Snowfall was thick. His headlights barely reached 10 feet ahead. To stay awake, he flipped through radio channels until static hit. Channel 19. At first, it was just crackling. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Is anyone out there?" I'm so cold, Eli assumed it was a stranded driver. "Copy that. What's your location?" he replied. Silence. Then, more clearly, "He won't let me leave." A chill ran down his spine. "Who won't let you leave?" Static swallowed the signal. Then the woman screamed. A bone-shattering scream that cut through the radio and echoed inside the cab. Eli jerked the truck to a stop, hands shaking. He switched to another channel. Minutes later, a gruff older trucker came on the radio. "If you hear voices on 19, don't answer. They're not talking to you. They're looking for a ride." Eli never turned his radio on again. Jake had hauled freight across every brutal stretch of Alaska, but nothing disturbed him as deeply as the night he picked up a hitchhiker. It was minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature where exposed skin freezes in seconds. Jake saw a figure on the side of the road, hooded, shivering, thumb out. Against every instinct, he slowed down. When the figure climbed in, Jake instantly noticed two things. 1. No footprints outside the truck. 2. The interior temperature dropped drastically. Jake tried to make conversation. "Rough night to be walking?" Silence. The hitchhikers stared forward, unmoving. Their breath didn't fog in the cold air. When Jake turned his head slightly, he noticed frost forming inside the windshield, around the passenger side only. "Where you headed?" Jake asked again. Without turning, the passenger whispered, "Home." Jake frowned. "Where's home?" Slowly, its head rotated, not like a human, but like something learning how a neck works. The hood slipped back. The skin wasn't skin. It was frostbitten ice. Veins frozen beneath the surface. Eyes like cracked glass. Jake slammed the brakes. The door flew open. The figure vanished into a swirl of icy snow. He looked at the passenger seat. Water puddle, shaped like a human body thawing. On the Yukon River Bridge, visibility disappears at night. Even locals refuse to cross past midnight. Logan didn't believe in ghost stories. He does now. At 1:14 a.m., halfway across the bridge, the road behind him vanished into darkness. Headlights ahead revealed only more bridge, no end in sight. After driving 15 minutes, the GPS glitched, recalculating. Then the dashboard lights dimmed. Logan checked the odometer. He had already driven 9 miles. The bridge is only half a mile long. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine roared, but outside, nothing changed. Just the endless wooden planks, the endless railings, the endless black. Then, someone stepped into his high beams. A man, soaking wet, dripping river water, staring directly at him. Logan jerked the wheel. The truck passed through the man, through him, as if he were made of mist. Suddenly, the bridge ended. He was on land. Heart hammering, Logan checked his mirrors. The man stood on the bridge entrance, dripping, smiling, raising a hand as if waving goodbye. Truckers say if headlights appear behind you on the Dalton Highway and follow at the exact same distance for miles, do not stop. Nick learned the hard way. He noticed headlights far behind him, maintaining distance no matter how fast or slow he drove. After 40 minutes, Nick used the CB radio. "To the vehicle behind me. Pass if you need." No reply. He slowed further. The headlights slowed too. Frustrated, Nick pulled off onto a snow turnout. The vehicle pulled off behind him. Nick climbed out, flashlight in hand, and walked toward it. But when he reached the spot, there was no car, no tire tracks, no headlights, just empty snow. He sprinted back toward his truck, but stopped. Now the headlights were in front of his truck, blinding white inches away. He squinted through the glare. The lights rose slowly off the ground and lifted into the air. It wasn't a vehicle. It was 2 glowing orbs, floating, watching him. Nick jumped into his cab and floored it. The orbs followed until sunrise, then simply vanished. Right off the Dalton Highway sits a small abandoned cabin, roof caving in, windows shattered. Truckers know the rule: if the cabin lights are on, don't stop. Steve was delivering machinery parts and saw it, a warm yellow light glowing through the cracks. Curious and tired, he stopped. When he pushed the cabin door, warmth washed over him. The fireplace was burning. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, hot, fresh. "Hello?" he called. A chair scraped the floor behind him. He spun around. An elderly man sat at the table, skin tight around his skull, face pale and stretched. "Cold night," the man whispered. "Stay." Steve backed toward the exit. The man's smile widened, revealing long, needle-like teeth. "Stay," he repeated, voice deeper now, layered like multiple voices speaking at once. Steve bolted. Once outside, he looked back. The cabin was dark, windows shattered, no fire, just a dead, rotting shell. After a blizzard, The snow on the roadside can reach 6 feet high. Tony had to stop to remove ice from his wipers. Silence. Just the engine humming. He dug at the snow with a shovel. He hit something solid. Not metal, not dirt. Something that felt like skin. Suddenly, the snow mound shifted. A pale arm burst out, clawing upward. Tony stumbled back as more snow collapsed, revealing a face, stretched, swollen, frozen, eyes open and moving. It gasped like lungs trying to remember how to breathe. Tony ran to his cab. As he started driving, the CB radio crackled. "Don't dig." We buried it for a reason. Tony never touched snow again. Trees along the Dalton grow thin and sparse, but enough to hide something watching you. Kyle saw movement in the tree line. Every time he looked, the shape vanished. Hours later, at a rest stop, he heard crunching snow. He looked out the passenger side mirror. 2 glowing eyes stared back, not animal-shaped, too high off the ground. Then, a voice outside his window. "Let me in. I've been following you since Coldfoot." Kyle floored it. For the next 50 miles, those glowing eyes appeared in his mirror. When dawn broke, they disappeared, but smeared on the driver's side door. Fingerprints. Not human-sized, too long, too thin. Tom was stuck behind another semi at 3 a.m., hazard lights on, but no movement. He approached and knocked on the cab door. No response. He opened it. Empty. Keys in the ignition, engine running, seatbelt fastened, as if someone had been sitting there moments ago. Tom returned to his own truck and radioed it in. Suddenly, the driverless truck began rolling forward. Hazard lights flashing. Tom followed at a safe distance as it picked up speed, swerving left and right, almost playful. Then, without warning, it turned sharply and drove into the woods. Full speed, crashing through trees, engine revving until the sound faded into the dark. Tom reported it. Authorities never found it. On Atigun Pass, cliffs of ice rise over the road like frozen giants. Henry stopped to check his chains. His flashlight beam reflected off ice, something dark beneath the surface. He stepped closer. It was a man, frozen inside the ice wall. Face twisted in terror, hands pressed against the ice as if begging to get out. Suddenly, the ice cracked. A long, slow crack running from head to toe. The man's eyes moved. They rolled to look at Henry. His mouth shifted, not open, just pressed against the ice. A whisper escaped. "Trade places with me." Henry stumbled back, horrified. As he ran to his truck, he heard tapping on the ice behind him. Tap, 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 like fingers from inside. He never stopped again on that pass. They say Alaska changes people. But on the Dalton Highway, it doesn't change you. It takes something from you. Jack Bearclaw Henderson had driven trucks for 14 years, mostly hauling heavy equipment through Alaska's frozen wastelands. He'd seen blizzards, avalanches, moose the size of sedans. Nothing scared him. Until the night he saw a truck driving itself. It was 3:17 a.m. Visibility, almost zero. Snow hammered the windshield like gravel. Jack slowed down, trying to locate the next mile marker. That's when he saw headlights in his rearview mirror. A long-nosed Peterbilt. No hazard lights, no radio check. Just speeding toward him out of the total blackness. Jack grabbed the CB radio. "Unknown southbound truck, throttle down. You're too close." No response. He looked again. The truck was now right on his tail, barely a car length behind him. Jack flicked his high beams toward the mirror and froze. There was no driver. Not a silhouette, not a shadow. Just an empty cab. barreling down the highway at 80 miles per hour. Jack's heart pounded. He shifted gears and tried to pull to the side. The rogue truck swerved with him, like it was mirroring his movements. Then a voice came over the radio. "Don't let it pass you. If it passes you, you disappear next." Jack looked up. The truck was speeding alongside him. Trying to pass, Jack slammed on the brakes, heart hammering in his chest. The empty truck mirrored every move he made, swerving left when he swerved left, braking when he braked. Snow whipped across the windshield, turning the highway into a white tunnel. Panic clawed at him. This was no ordinary mechanical malfunction. He could feel something alive behind that wheel, even if no one was there. He radioed a nearby driver. "Southeast of mile 178. I've got a truck on my tail. No driver." "Something's wrong," Static replied. Then silence. The headlights were suddenly gone. For a breathless moment, the Dalton Highway seemed empty, and Jack exhaled. Relief, brief and false. A low hum vibrated under the wheels of his rig. The truck reappeared out of nowhere, now directly in front of him. Jack had no time to react. The windshield reflected something terrifying. A pale, twisted face staring back at him from the empty cab. The eyes weren't human, glowing faintly orange through the darkness, fixed, unblinking, judging. The dashboard lights flickered. The CB crackled again. "If it passes you, you disappear next." Jack gripped the wheel, praying the black ice wouldn't betray him. The rogue truck nudged his bumper, trying to force him off the road. For miles, they danced through the storm, two rigs locked in a chilling, impossible game. Jack's hands ached from gripping the wheel, knuckles white. The rogue truck stayed glued to him, never blinking, never slowing. Every mile marker passed like a hallucination. The numbers seemed to blur and stretch unnaturally. It was as if the Dalton Highway itself had warped into an endless loop, trapping him between reality and something far darker. The storm intensified, snow piling over the road, creating invisible ridges that jolted the rig violently. Jack tried to outmaneuver the truck, taking sharp turns and sudden lane changes, but it mirrored him perfectly. Panic turned into desperation. He could feel its presence inside the cab, a cold, almost tangible weight pressing down. Then, without warning, the truck vanished from behind him. Relief flooded Jack's chest until he glanced ahead. The road had changed. The next mile marker read 999, impossibly far. And in the distance, the empty semi sat blocking the road, headlights glowing like the eyes of a predator. Jack hit the horn. The CB radio sparked to life with a distorted, unearthly whisper. "You can't leave. You're ours now." A gust of icy wind slammed the cab door. The truck lurched forward, as if the storm itself was pushing him toward the ghostly vehicle. Jack realized with horror that he wasn't just being chased. He was being herded. Jack's breathing was ragged, each exhale freezing instantly in the frigid air. The rogue truck remained ahead, its headlights piercing the blizzard like twin suns of terror. In the distance, he spotted what looked like a checkpoint, a small shack with flickering lights. Relief surged through him. He thought he had found safety. He steered toward it, praying for warmth, a radio, a human face. But as he drew closer, the shack began to distort. The lights flickered erratically, and the shape of the building stretched and warped, elongating unnaturally across the frozen landscape. When he finally reached the spot, there was nothing. Just snow. No shack, no lights, no checkpoint. Jack slammed the brakes. Panic clawed at him. The rogue truck appeared beside him, eerily silent, perfectly aligned, no engine sound. The CB crackled again with that same distorted whisper. "You can't stop. You can't hide." The highway owns you, Jack's heart pounded as he realized the truth. The Dalton Highway wasn't just a road. It was a trap. The rogue truck wasn't chasing him. It was guarding the highway, ensuring no one left alive without paying a price. Shaking, he gripped the wheel tighter, realizing the only way forward was to keep driving, faster than he had ever driven in his life. But every turn, every mile, felt like running in place, the highway stretching endlessly into the storm. Jack's rig groaned as the tires struggled against the ice-coated road. The blizzard showed no mercy, snow piling high against the roadside embankments. For hours he drove in silence, but then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. A dark shape moving through the snow, pacing the road like a predator. At first, he thought it was a moose or a wandering sled dog. But the shadow was upright, humanoid, gliding across the drifts with unnatural speed. Its movements were jerky, inhuman, like a puppet being jerked by invisible strings. Jack's stomach churned. He tried to focus on the road ahead, but the shadow kept pace with his truck, maintaining a steady distance, vanishing when he turned his head, reappearing when he blinked. He grabbed the CB radio, voice trembling. "Anyone out there? I've got something following me." "Mile 182. Static answered. Then silence. The shadow suddenly leapt onto the highway, crossing directly in front of his truck. Jack swerved violently. The truck fishtailed, ice screeching under the wheels. He glanced in the side mirror. The shadow now stood on the shoulder, staring directly at him. Its face, a hollow mask of frost and darkness, as if it had never been human. Jack realized with a cold certainty. This was no animal, no person. It was a guardian of the Dalton, and he had trespassed too far. Jack thought the worst was over, but the night had only just begun. He had been driving for what felt like hours, yet the darkness seemed endless. Suddenly, through the thick blizzard, he noticed two faint lights in the distance, hovering slightly above the road. At first, he assumed they were another truck, a welcome relief. As he drew closer, a sickening realization hit him. The lights moved independently, floating in perfect alignment with his rig. No vehicle could stay airborne like that. They pulsed with a soft, orange glow, almost like eyes, watching him intently. Jack slammed the brakes and looked around, but the highway behind him was empty. A low whisper echoed through the CB radio, static-laden and distorted. "You can't outrun us. You belong here now." Jack's hands shook as he gripped the wheel. The floating lights began to descend, hovering closer to the cab. For a brief, terrifying moment, he could see pale, elongated faces pressed against the glow, their mouths opening and closing silently. He slammed the accelerator, plowing through the icy drifts. The lights chased him, reflecting in the side mirrors, dancing along the edges of the cab like living fire. Every mile was agony, but Jack knew there was no stopping. The Dalton Highway was alive, and it was determined to keep him in its grip. Jack's grip on the wheel was like iron, knuckles white, sweat freezing on his brow despite the minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit air. Hours had passed, or maybe minutes. He couldn't tell. The blizzard had swallowed any sense of time. As he focused on the road, he noticed something impossible. The mile markers were disappearing. Mile 182, gone. Mile 183, vanished. Only the white emptiness of the snow stretched ahead. Panic surged. He realized the highway itself was shifting, stretching like some living entity. Every familiar landmark was gone. Trees that had lined the road moments ago were now twisted, barren shapes reaching into the sky. The rogue truck, empty cab glowing faintly, appeared again in his side mirror, pacing him. It was patient, as if it knew he could not stop. He could only drive forward. Jack tried the CB radio again, desperate. "Anyone, anything, respond," static hissed back. Then a distorted whisper. "Don't fight it. You'll never leave." Suddenly, the storm lightened for a brief instant. In that moment, Jack caught a glimpse of the horizon. A dark figure standing atop a ridge, arms raised, watching him. When the wind howled again, it was gone. The highway had swallowed it back into the blizzard. Jack realized the only way to survive was to keep moving, faster than he thought possible. But each mile felt like a journey through an endless nightmare. Jack thought he had seen everything the Dalton Highway could throw at him. That illusion shattered when he saw a figure standing by the roadside. A lone hitchhiker, waving feebly through the storm, barely visible in the whiteout. Something deep in Jack screamed at him not to stop. Every fiber of his being told him this was a trap. But he was tired. Exhaustion clawed at him. Against his instincts, he eased the rig to the shoulder. The figure climbed into the cab, silent, hood drawn over its face. The temperature inside the truck dropped instantly, frost forming on the dashboard, mist curling from the vents. Jack tried to speak, but his voice froze mid-sentence. When he finally glanced at the passenger seat, the hood slipped back. The face was frozen solid, skin pale and cracked, eyes black as coal, staring into his soul. It did not blink. It did not breathe. It simply sat there, staring, smiling faintly, as if aware of his terror. A cold whisper echoed in the cab, though no mouth moved. "You shouldn't have stopped." Jack slammed the door and floored the accelerator. The hitchhiker vanished, leaving behind only frost in the air and a lingering sense of dread. He knew the highway would remember this mistake. Jack's exhaustion was crushing. His eyes burned from hours of staring through the blizzard, his body numb from the cold. But the Dalton Highway wasn't done with him yet. Ahead, headlights appeared, dozens of them. A convoy of trucks moving in eerie silence, perfectly aligned, like ghosts gliding across the ice. As he drew closer, he realized something horrifying. The trucks were all driverless, their cabs empty, glowing faintly from inside. The air around them shimmered with a strange heat that froze his fingers on the wheel. Jack tried to radio anyone, but the static only carried that distorted whisper once again. "Join us, or vanish." The convoy began to mirror his movements, closing in from both sides. He swerved violently, trying to escape, but the snow seemed to bend, forming barriers and chicanes, herding him like prey. Panic gripped him like iron. Then, in his side mirror, he caught a glimpse of his own truck, or what appeared to be it. Glowing faintly from the inside, doors opening and closing by themselves. The blizzard intensified, the snow whipping past like blades, and Jack realized the highway had become a living labyrinth. He had no choice but to keep driving or be absorbed into the phantom convoy forever. Jack's rig shuddered as the ghostly convoy closed in from all sides. The snowstorm had become a solid wall, visibility reduced to a few feet. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, but stopping now meant certain death. The highway had claimed so many before him. He knew he was next if he faltered. Ahead, the road twisted impossibly, curving into a canyon of ice and darkness. The lights from the convoy reflected in the icy cliffs, multiplying into 1,000 glowing eyes. Jack could hear faint whispers through the blizzard, some pleading, some mocking, carried by the wind into the cab. He pressed the accelerator to the floor. The truck responded, but the highway itself seemed to resist, ridges of ice rising under the tires, forcing him into an impossible path. Suddenly, The lead ghost truck appeared directly in front of him, headlights glaring, engine silent. Jack swerved violently, narrowly avoiding collision, and the snow beneath him buckled. A crackling sound echoed like ice breaking under immense weight. He realized the highway wasn't just a road anymore. It was alive, feeding on fear, bending reality to trap him forever. In a final burst of adrenaline, Jack veered toward a faint clearing, slamming the brakes as the storm parted momentarily. The convoy and the highway's distortions vanished. Silence. The sun began to rise over the icy peaks. Jack's hands were frozen, his heart pounding, but he had survived. For now. One thought lingered. The Dalton Highway remembers, and it waits for the next traveler. Derek "Icebreaker" Malone had driven every major highway in Alaska, but nothing compared to the Nikiski Bridge at night. Locals whispered about it, warning truckers to avoid crossing after dark. Derek laughed it off. Ghost stories were for tourists, not seasoned drivers like him. It was 2:45 a.m. Fog clung to the frozen waters below, swirling like smoke. Derek's rig creaked as he entered the bridge, the steel girders looming overhead. The lights on the bridge flickered in rhythmic pulses, casting shadows that danced across the icy deck. Every instinct told him something was off. Halfway across, the CB radio crackled to life, cutting through the hum of the engine. Static at first, then a voice. "Don't look down, or you won't return." Derek's laughter died in his throat. He glanced over the side. Nothing. Just the dark waters far below. But then he noticed faint, shadowy figures on the bridge itself, standing still in the fog, too still to be human, too large to be animals. The truck shuddered, as if the bridge itself were reacting to his presence. Derek gripped the wheel, heartbeat racing. Something wasn't just watching him. It was waiting for him to cross. Derek's hands trembled on the wheel as he drove slowly across the bridge. The shadowy figures remained, motionless. Yet somehow he felt their gaze piercing through the fog. Each step of the rig seemed amplified, the metal groaning under the weight, the tires squealing on ice. He tried the CB radio, hoping another driver might answer. Anyone out there?" "I'm on Nikiski Bridge." Only static replied. Then a whisper, distorted and low. "You shouldn't be here." Derek's eyes widened as one figure stepped forward, its outline more defined. It was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its head tilted, as if studying him, memorizing every detail. Derek pressed the accelerator, trying to escape. But the bridge seemed to stretch endlessly. Every time he looked ahead, the exit seemed farther away, the fog thickening like a wall of milk. Then, a soft scraping sound echoed across the metal deck. The shadow raised one arm, pointing directly at him. Derek felt a chill crawl up his spine, colder than the icy wind whipping through the cab. Something was waiting at the other side. Something that claimed anyone who dared cross too slowly. Derek felt a sudden jolt. His rig shuddered, and the engine died. Darkness swallowed the cab as the bridge lights flickered and dimmed. Panic surged through him. The cold fog now pressed against the windshield like fingers. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. The truck was completely dead, frozen in place over the haunted bridge. The shadow figure stepped closer, moving impossibly fast across the icy metal, silent except for the faint squeak of joints bending unnaturally. Derek fumbled with the radio, but it emitted only static, punctuated by that chilling whisper, "You can't leave. Not tonight." Then he noticed movement below the bridge. The waters were unnaturally calm, but dark shapes shifted beneath the surface, rising just enough to reflect the dim bridge lights. Derek's stomach turned. He had crossed bridges before in Alaska, but he had never felt the sensation of being observed by something alive and not human. The shadow's head tilted again, slowly, methodically. Derek realized with horror, the bridge didn't just want to stop him. It wanted to consume him entirely, body and soul. Like the dark waters below had already claimed countless others, Derek pressed his face against the windshield, straining to see through the dense fog. That whisper returned, louder this time, filling the cab with a sound that was almost a chorus of voices. They spoke all at once, overlapping, warning, mocking, demanding. Turn back, or join us, forever. The words reverberated inside his skull, freezing his thoughts. Derek's hands trembled. The shadow figure now stood just a few feet away on the icy bridge, impossibly close despite no bridge structure connecting him and the figure. The fog swirled violently around it, forming indistinct humanoid shapes that flickered and merged like spirits trapped between worlds. Derek tried to start the truck again. The engine roared to life, but the truck lurched violently, as if the bridge itself had decided to resist his escape. Every inch forward felt like battling an invisible wall. The shadows multiplied, surrounding him, pressing in from all sides. Time seemed to stretch, seconds becoming hours. He realized in a cold, sinking certainty, this was no ordinary bridge. It was a gateway, a threshold for the lost souls of the Dalton and Nikiski highways. And tonight, Derek had walked straight into it. Derek gritted his teeth, gripping the steering wheel as frost began creeping across the windshield. He could feel it forming inside the cab as well, like invisible fingers crawling along his arms and neck. The shadow figure raised a hand, elongated, skeletal, its fingertips glowing faintly orange. Derek felt an icy chill snake across his skin, making him shiver uncontrollably. The truck lurched forward despite his hesitation, as if the bridge itself was forcing him onward. Every time he tried to slow down, the rig would accelerate slightly on its own, guiding him deeper into the fog. The whispers returned, now a chorus of frozen voices. You cannot leave. The bridge takes what it wants. Derek glanced to his side mirror. Another semi-truck appeared out of the fog, empty cab glowing, headlights illuminating nothing but swirling mist. He realized the bridge wasn't just haunted. It created phantom vehicles, shadows of drivers who had disappeared over the years, trapped forever on the icy span. Panic clawed at him, but Derek knew stopping was no longer an option. To survive, he had to cross the bridge entirely, into whatever awaited at the other side. As Derek drove deeper into the fog, he noticed tiny points of light appearing along the bridge, faint at first, then growing brighter. They hovered just above the icy deck, pulsating in rhythm with his heartbeat. Derek's stomach churned. These were no ordinary reflections or bridge lamps. Each light contained a face frozen in agony, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. The CB radio crackled violently, static filling the cab, then that chilling whisper again, "Don't slow down, or you will join them." Derek's hands shook, but he kept pressing the accelerator. The semi lurched and fishtailed over patches of ice, but the bridge seemed to bend reality around him, narrowing lanes, elongating railings, forcing him into a perilous path. Every flicker of light in the fog felt alive, moving closer, reaching for him. He realized with terror that these phantom lights were souls claimed by the bridge, trapped in an eternal loop of fear and icy torment. And now, by crossing, Derek had marked himself as their next companion. The only way out was forward, faster than fear itself. Derek's vision blurred as frost began to coat the interior of his cab. The steering wheel was slippery, the controls stiff, and every breath formed clouds of mist that seemed to hang in the air, almost solid. He could feel a presence inside the cab, subtle, like a weight pressing against his shoulder. But when he looked, there was nothing. The shadow figure had moved closer, now visible through the frost-covered windshield. Its orange glowing eyes seemed to pierce through the ice, staring directly at him. Derek's knuckles went white as he fought to maintain control. The phantom lights from the previous mile floated past, whispering in unison. Join us. Feel the cold. Forever. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, but he knew better. The bridge wasn't just haunted, it was alive, feeding on fear, trapping drivers. He gritted his teeth, forcing the trucks forward despite the ice, the fog, and the suffocating cold pressing down from every angle. Derek realized the bridge had one rule. You either keep moving or become part of the frozen nightmare. And tonight, the Nikiski Bridge had already claimed too many. Derek's ears rang with whispers, louder now, filling the cab like an invisible chorus. The voices weren't just in his head. They came from every direction, echoing off the steel beams, merging with the howling wind. Words repeated in a chilling cadence. You cannot escape. You are ours. The semi's interior grew colder by the second. Frost formed along the dashboard, creeping toward Derek like crawling fingers. He looked at the side mirror and froze. The bridge behind him was swarming with shadowy silhouettes, semi-trucks appearing and disappearing, their headlights glowing like trapped eyes. Panic surged as one figure suddenly appeared inside the fog outside the windshield, standing in the lane ahead. Derek slammed the brakes, but the rig skidded across the ice, tires squealing. The shadow tilted its head, as if mocking him. The bridge itself seemed to pulse, metal groaning under an unseen weight. He realized the Nikiski Bridge wasn't merely a haunted place. It was sentient, a predator of drivers, feeding on fear and freezing every soul who dared to cross at night. Derek gritted his teeth, knowing the only chance of survival was to drive straight through. Faster than the cold, faster than the shadows, faster than the whispers. Derek's heart pounded as he approached the far end of the bridge. The fog thickened, swallowing the exit like a wall of white. He could no longer see the water below, nor the steel beams above, only endless mist and the glowing, pulsating eyes of phantom trucks closing in from all sides. The semi skidded violently, metal screeching, and Derek realized the bridge itself had shifted. The far end seemed impossibly far away, stretching like a mirage. The shadow figure hovered ahead, raising its elongated arm, pointing at him with glowing fingertips. Whispers surrounded him from every angle. You will never leave. You belong to the bridge. Derek pressed the accelerator harder than ever, fighting both ice and fear. Every mile felt like an eternity. The ghostly convoy mirrored him perfectly, closing in. But somehow, his desperate speed began to carry him forward. The shadow on the bridge reached out one final time, and for a moment, Derek felt icy fingers brush his shoulder. Then, as if by miracle, a faint glow appeared ahead. The bridge's exit, emerging from the fog. Derek's rig skidded but stayed on course, crossing the last icy span. Behind him, the phantom convoy and the shadowy figures vanished into the mist, leaving only silence and frost in their wake. Derek's heart pounded as he approached the far end of the bridge. The fog thickened, swallowing the exit like a wall of white. He could no longer see the water below, nor the steel beams above, only endless mist and the glowing, pulsating eyes of phantom trucks closing in from all sides. The semi skidded violently, metal screeching, and Derek realized the bridge itself had shifted. The far end seemed impossibly far away, stretching like a mirage. The shadow figure hovered ahead, raising its elongated arm, pointing at him with glowing fingertips. Whispers surrounded him from every angle. "You will never leave. You belong to the bridge." Derek pressed the accelerator harder than ever, fighting both ice and fear. Every mile felt like an eternity. The ghostly convoy mirrored him perfectly, closing in. But somehow, his desperate speed began to carry him forward. The shadow on the bridge reached out one final time, and for a moment, Derek felt icy fingers brush his shoulder. Then, as if by miracle, a faint glow appeared ahead. The bridge's exit, emerging from the fog. Derek's rig skidded but stayed on course, crossing the last icy span. Behind him, the phantom convoy and the shadowy figures vanished into the mist, leaving only silence and frost in their wake. Tommy Northwind Harris had driven the Glacier Highway countless times, but this night felt different. The snow fell relentlessly, coating the road in white and swallowing everything beyond a few feet. The moonlight reflected off the ice, blinding him intermittently. A sense of isolation gripped him. This stretch of highway was notorious for strange vanishings, but he had always laughed them off as stories. Halfway through the pass, Tommy noticed faint tire tracks beside the road that hadn't been there a minute ago. They were wide, irregular, and seemed to twist unnaturally. Then the CB radio crackled, barely audible through static. "Turn back, you shouldn't be here." Tommy laughed nervously, shaking his head. Ghost stories again, he thought. But then a shadow moved at the edge of his headlights. A truck, but unlike any he had seen. Its tires didn't touch the road. It floated slightly, gliding silently over the ice. Something deep in his chest clenched. This highway had a reputation for swallowing drivers whole, leaving no trace behind. And Tommy now felt the first stirrings of fear that what he was seeing might be more than just legend. Snowstorm intensified, turning the highway into a blur of white and ice. The strange floating truck appeared again, this time in his side mirror, pacing him silently. It moved perfectly with his rig. No engine sound, no tire tracks, just an unnatural presence that mimicked his every move. He tried to radio for help. Static, then a distorted whisper. "You can't escape. Join us." Tommy's stomach dropped. He realized the highway itself seemed to shift beneath his tires. Mile markers disappeared as he passed. Trees twisted into unfamiliar shapes. The familiar curves of Glacier Highway were now alien and menacing. Every attempt to turn back or stop seemed impossible. Suddenly, the phantom truck flickered, revealing glimpses of frozen faces pressed against its windows, eyes wide with fear and mouths open in silent screams. Tommy's heart pounded. He understood then that the Glacier Highway didn't just hide disappearances. It trapped them, feeding on the terror of every trucker who dared drive its icy path at night. The wind howled through the cab, rattling the windows as Tommy's rig barreled forward. He could barely see the road ahead. The storm had become a blinding wall of white. Then the whispers started, faint at first, carried by the icy wind, but gradually growing louder and closer. They were indistinct voices, some pleading, some mocking, all urging him to turn back. The floating truck was still with him, sometimes visible in the corner of his eye, sometimes gone, as if the fog itself swallowed it. But Tommy noticed something worse. The cab felt colder, far below the freezing temperature outside. Frost began to creep along the windshield, curling like skeletal fingers, fogging the glass in unnatural patterns. He tried to radio again, desperation clawing at him. Only static. Then, almost audible over the wind. "You cannot leave. The highway keeps what it wants." Tommy gritted his teeth. He realized the glacier highway wasn't just snow and ice. It was alive, bending reality, consuming those who dared cross it at night. The floating truck, the whispers, the frost, all warnings. One misstep and he would vanish like the countless truckers before him. As Tommy fought the steering wheel, the floating truck suddenly appeared directly in front of him, blocking the lane. It hovered inches above the ice, headlights glowing faintly, illuminating shapes in the fog that twisted and writhed like trapped spirits. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching, but the rig skidded uncontrollably across patches of black ice. Through the swirling fog, he saw a shadowy figure emerge from the ghostly truck, tall, impossibly thin, moving with jerky, unnatural motions. Its head tilted unnaturally as it observed him, silent, but somehow demanding obedience. The whispers grew into a chorus of warning. "Do not stop, or join us forever." Tommy realized with horror that the highway didn't just swallow truckers. It manipulated them, forcing them into submission with fear itself. He pressed the accelerator, praying to escape the supernatural presence. But the bridge of ice and fog seemed endless, stretching on with no end in sight. And Tommy glanced in the side mirrors and froze. The reflections no longer showed his own rig. Instead, the mirrors displayed ghostly images of trucks, some empty, some with frozen drivers staring straight at him, their eyes hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams. The floating truck followed in perfect unison, gliding alongside him as if controlling his every move. The highway itself had changed. Trees that lined the road moments ago were now twisted into jagged, unnatural forms. Mile markers were gone. Snowdrifts had risen impossibly high, forming walls on either side of the lane. Every instinct screamed that stopping would mean death, yet the act of moving forward felt equally dangerous. The whispers returned, now urgent and overlapping. "You belong to the highway. You cannot leave." Tommy's heart raced. He understood the glacier highway was a trap, a predator in human form, and he was its newest prey. He gritted his teeth, gripping the wheel harder than ever, knowing he had no choice but to fight through the nightmare if he wanted to survive. Tommy forced the truck forward, the engine straining as the icy highway seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. The fog thickened, swirling violently, carrying with it a chorus of distorted whispers that seemed to come from all directions at once. Some voices begged for help, others laughed cruelly, but all shared the same chilling warning. "You cannot leave. The highway wants you." The floating ghostly truck appeared again, this time gliding directly above the icy surface, headlights casting ghastly shadows across the snow. Tommy's breath froze in the cab as frost began spreading along the dashboard, forming delicate yet menacing patterns. His hands shook uncontrollably, gripping the wheel, every sense alert for the next unnatural movement. Suddenly, a wall of shadow moved across the highway. Not a solid object, but a distorted ripple of darkness, as if the air itself had gained weight and malevolence. The road under Tommy's tires groaned, bending in impossible angles. The highway wasn't just snow and ice anymore. It had become a sentient trap, feeding on terror, forcing him to confront the nightmare in motion. Out of the fog, more ghostly trucks emerged, forming a convoy that surrounded Tommy's rig. Their engines were silent, headlights glowing dimly, creating a tunnel of pale, cold light. Each truck seemed to mirror his every movement, accelerating when he accelerated, braking when he braked. Panic clawed at him, escape felt impossible. The mirrors continued to betray him, reflecting faces frozen in agony, eyes wide with horror. Tommy understood that the Glacier Highway had claimed countless truckers before him, trapping their spirits in an eternal loop of fear and ice. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a deafening chorus. Yet, amid the terror, he felt a single, stubborn thought. He would not disappear tonight. He pressed the accelerator, weaving through the frozen convoy. The ice groaned, snow swirled, but the highway began to unravel the illusion of endless entrapment, revealing a faint glimmer of the road ahead, the only chance of survival. Tommy reached the central stretch of the storm, a part of the Glacier Highway locals called the heart of the blizzard. Visibility was nearly zero. Snow whipped across the windshield like icy knives, and the phantom convoy seemed to press inward from all sides. His rig skidded over hidden ice ridges, nearly tipping several times. Then he saw it. A single shadow figure standing in the middle of the highway, tall and thin, glowing eyes locked on him. Every instinct screamed to swerve, but the icy road offered no room for error. The whispers were deafening now, imploring, threatening, consuming his mind. Tommy gritted his teeth, focusing on the faint glimmer of light ahead, the exit. He realized the Glacier Highway didn't just hunt. It tested the will of those who dared cross it, preying on fear, indecision, and hesitation. With determination, he pushed forward, every second a battle of nerve against the supernatural forces surrounding him. Tommy's vision blurred, exhaustion overtaking him. The phantom convoy pressed closer, the shadow figure moving alongside, almost synchronized with his rig. Frost coated the controls, and every breath formed solid clouds inside the cab. He knew stopping now meant joining the countless others who had vanished on this cursed highway. Desperate, he focused on the faint light in the distance. The edge of the storm, the exit. The convoy wavered, the shadows flickered, almost as if the highway recognized his will to survive. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity, each second an unrelenting trial of nerve and determination. With one final surge, Tommy maneuvered his rig through the icy chaos, the phantom convoy dissolving into the storm behind him. The shadow figure's glowing eyes lingered in the distance for a fleeting second before vanishing entirely. Finally, Tommy saw the edge of the Glacier Highway. Dawn light began to pierce through the blizzard, revealing the familiar snowy landscape. The road behind him now appeared ordinary, silent, as if the night's horrors had never existed. But he knew better. The whispers were gone, the phantom convoy vanished, yet the icy chill still lingered in his bones. Tommy understood that some highways in Alaska were alive in ways the mind could not comprehend, feeding on fear, bending reality, and trapping souls. He would never forget the frozen faces, the floating trucks, the shadow figure, nor the terrifying lesson that some roads demand more than skill to survive. With a final shudder, he pressed the accelerator and drove on, determined to leave the horrors behind, but aware that the Glacier Highway would always be waiting for the next driver, foolish enough to enter the storm after dark. Jake Ironwheel Thompson had driven Denali Pass countless times, but this night felt unnervingly quiet. The highway was blanketed in fresh snow, muffling the sounds of his rig's engine and tires. In the distance, a small wooden cabin appeared, lights flickering in the heavy snowfall. Truckers told tales of that cabin, a place that seemed to exist only at night, drawing drivers in and trapping them in a living nightmare. Curiosity mixed with fatigue, and Jake decided to investigate. He parked near the cabin and stepped out, the wind immediately biting through his coat. The air was thick, almost stifling, as though the cabin exhaled cold and and silence. As he approached, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, it smelled faintly of decay and burned wood. Suddenly, the lights flickered, revealing shadows moving across the walls, though no one else was there. A whisper echoed in the cabin, soft but menacing. "You shouldn't have come. Now you belong to us." Jake froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but the door slammed shut behind him. The cabin seemed alive, breathing, shifting, and watching, its walls pulsating with a sinister energy that made his heart hammer in his chest. Jake stepped cautiously into the cabin, boots crunching on the frost-covered wooden floor. The inside was deceptively cozy, but an unnatural chill wrapped around him like a vice. The shadows on the walls seemed to shift and pulse, forming distorted faces that vanished when he blinked. Every creak of the cabin made him jump, as though the house itself were alive and mocking his presence. Then the whispers came, soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind. "You cannot leave. You are ours now." Jake turned abruptly, but no one was there. The walls seemed to lean closer, the floorboards subtly bending, as if trying to trap him. The flickering lights cast elongated shapes across the room, and he noticed the fireplace, cold and empty. Yet faint smoke curled upward, forming ghostly silhouettes of past victims. Panic surged, and he ran to the door, but it refused to open. The handle rattled violently in his hand, as though resisting his escape. Jake realized the cabin wasn't just haunted. It existed to trap travelers, feeding on fear, manipulating reality, and holding them within its walls indefinitely. Jake's eyes darted around the cabin, heart hammering in his chest. In the far corner, a shadow moved independently of the flickering light, tall, thin, its edges blurred like smoke. Every instinct screamed danger, but the figure didn't advance. It merely watched him, waiting, patient and menacing. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into an unintelligible chorus that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "You cannot leave. Your soul belongs here." He tried the door again. Locked. Windows, frosted over and unbreakable. Panic clawed at his mind. The shadow began to stretch toward him, tendrils of darkness creeping along the floor, wrapping around the furniture. Each second felt like a lifetime as the cabin shifted subtly around him, hallways elongating, corners bending, making it impossible to find a path out. Jake realized with terror that the cabin wasn't just haunted. It manipulated perception itself, warping reality to ensnare anyone who entered. Survival meant staying calm and finding a way to outsmart the house itself, a thought easier said than done as the shadows whispered closer. The floorboards beneath Jake's feet groaned and shifted, icy cracks spreading outward with each step. He jumped back as the wood seemed to move like a living thing, attempting to trap him in place. Snowflakes from outside swirled into the room through unseen cracks, frosting the floor and his boots. The whispering escalated into an almost deafening roar, voices overlapping in chaotic harmony. They were countless, tormented souls bound to the cabin, each one trying to pull him deeper into the walls. One voice cut through the chaos, clear and chilling. "Stay. Forever." Jake's hands trembled, and he lunged for a small window. Frost covered every pane. He pressed his face against the glass, breath freezing on the surface, only to see a reflection of the shadow figure behind him, grinning silently. The cabin was alive, a predator, and the only way out would require more than courage. It would demand cunning and sheer determination. Desperation clawed at Jake as he turned toward the fireplace. Though cold and empty, smoke began rising, forming horrific faces and ghostly hands reaching out toward him. The shadows on the walls converged toward the hearth, twisting into nightmarish figures of past victims, frozen in terror. The whispers now formed words he could understand. "You will never leave. Your fear feeds us." Jake took a shaky step back, realizing the cabin's heart was the fireplace, the center of its malevolent power. Every shadow, every creaking floorboard, every whisper seemed to originate there. The figure in the corner flickered, moving closer to the hearth, as if drawing strength from the spectral flames. Panic surged. But somewhere deep inside, Jake felt a spark of clarity. The cabin thrived on fear, but hesitation was exactly what it wanted. Moving swiftly, he planned his next steps, knowing the only way to survive was to act before the shadows consumed him entirely. Jake's eyes fell on an old mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. In its reflection, the cabin appeared larger and more twisted than reality. Hallways stretching endlessly, corners bending at impossible angles. The shadow figure's eyes glowed within the glass, fixed on him, while the whispers escalated into a deafening chorus of dread. Suddenly, his reflection moved independently, smirking as if mocking his fear. Jake's heart raced. The cabin wasn't just alive. It manipulated perception, trapping his mind as well as his body. Every step he took seemed to echo endlessly in the warped reflection, amplifying the sense of isolation and terror. The whispers spoke directly now. "You belong here. Forever." Jake realized that the mirror could either be a portal or a trap. The reflection wasn't just showing the cabin, it was a warning, a glimpse of what awaited those who faltered. Summoning every ounce of courage, he decided to focus not on the shadow figure or the twisted reflections, but on finding the real exit. Beyond the illusions and the fear, Jake noticed a narrow staircase leading to a hidden attic. He hesitated, but something compelled him upward. The steps groaned under his weight, icy drafts cutting through the cabin. At the top, the attic was filled with empty chairs, each facing a small window, and faint whispers coming from every corner. As he stepped closer, the whispers coalesced into discernible words. "We waited, and now you are here." Shadows shifted across the walls, forming the faces of countless truckers who had disappeared in this cursed cabin. Their eyes pleaded, begged, and warned simultaneously. Jake realized that the attic was the gathering point of all trapped souls, a chamber where fear was concentrated, feeding the cabin's dark power. Despite terror gripping him, Jake pressed on. He had to move through the source of the haunting to escape it, knowing hesitation meant permanent entrapment. The shadow figure appeared at the attic entrance, silent, waiting. A grim reminder that the cabin would not release him easily. Descending from the attic, Jake found the cabin had changed. Hallways twisted and bent, doors led nowhere, and the walls seemed to breathe, contracting and expanding subtly. The shadows followed him, whispering threats and warnings. Every step felt like walking deeper into a nightmare designed specifically to feed his fear and break his resolve. Frost covered every surface, forming sharp crystalline patterns that reflected the flickering light, creating illusions of movement. Jake could see fleeting figures darting through the walls, almost taunting him, daring him to falter. He gritted his teeth, focusing solely on the faint glow of the front door, the one path that might lead to freedom. He realized that the cabin thrived on hesitation and fear. The corridor was a test, a gauntlet meant to trap him forever. Every whispered warning was a lure, every shadow a predator. Jake knew survival meant ignoring the illusions, moving forward with unyielding determination. After what felt like hours, Jake reached the cabin's front door. The shadow figure loomed, tendrils of darkness stretching toward him. The whispers screamed in unison, "You cannot leave. You belong to us." With a deep breath, Jake slammed the door open and bolted outside. The night wind bit at him, carrying the sound of the whispers fading but never entirely gone. Snowflakes swirled around him, but the cabin now appeared smaller, almost ordinary, a stark contrast to the nightmare inside. He sprinted toward his rig, frost-laden and exhausted, hearing the cabin's heartbeat echo in his mind. The shadow figure was gone, but he knew it still lingered, waiting for the next traveler. Jake understood that some places in Alaska were alive in ways few could comprehend, feeding on fear, bending reality, and trapping the unwary. Jake reached his semi-truck, frost coating his hair and jacket. As he started the engine, the cabin disappeared into the snow, leaving no trace that it had ever existed. His hands shook, but he knew one truth. He had survived. But the memory of the haunted cabin would never leave him. The Denali Pass was treacherous in many ways, but Jake now knew it could also be supernaturally alive. A predator feeding on fear, bending reality, and claiming the souls of those who faltered. He pressed the accelerator, leaving the cursed cabin behind. Yet every mile carried the lingering echo of whispers and shadows. Survival was possible, but the experience would haunt him forever. Rick "Blizzard" Malone had driven the icebound highway countless times, but this night felt different. The wind screamed, snow ripped across the windshield, and visibility was near zero. Suddenly, all the lights along the highway vanished, leaving only darkness and the white blur of snow. His rig's engine sounded strangely muffled, as if the cold itself was absorbing the noise. Then, through the swirling snow, he saw it. A phantom semi-truck gliding without tracks, moving in perfect parallel to his own. Its lights glowed faintly, but there was no engine sound, no reflection on the ice, nothing that belonged in reality. Rick froze. His years of trucking experience screamed that something unnatural was at play. He reached for the CB radio. Static nothing. A whisper, carried on the icy wind, hissed, "You shouldn't be here. The highway keeps what it wants." Rick gripped the wheel, heart racing. The highway seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and bending beneath the tires. Every instinct told him to stop, but the phantom rig mirrored his movements perfectly, forcing him onward into the heart of the storm. Rick squinted through the blizzard, trying to make sense of the phantom truck. Suddenly, more ghostly rigs appeared, forming a convoy that stretched into the snowy darkness. Each one glided silently over the ice, perfectly aligned with Rick's rig, creating an eerie sense of being trapped in a supernatural formation. The wind carried whispers, countless voices overlapping, some pleading, some mocking. The highway takes, the highway keeps, the highway remembers. Rick tried to accelerate, but the convoy mirrored him precisely. Every turn, every adjustment to the throttle, the phantom trucks mimicked perfectly, forcing him into obedience. The highway beneath him seemed alive, rising and dipping unnaturally, almost as if it were breathing. He realized the icebound highway wasn't just frozen. It was sentient, feeding on fear and commanding the movements of those who dared travel its roads at night. Every instinct screamed to flee, but escape seemed impossible with the phantom convoy pressuring him at every moment. As Rick drove deeper into the storm, the highway seemed to bend and shimmer unnaturally. The snow and ice created illusions, frozen mirrors reflecting phantom trucks that weren't there, shadows stretching and twisting in impossible ways. His own reflection appeared in these icy patches, grinning menacingly back at him, separate from his real movements. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a chaotic chorus. "You cannot leave. You are ours." Every attempt to turn or brake was countered by the highway itself. Ice shifted beneath his tires, forming invisible barriers, forcing him toward a narrow corridor flanked by the phantom convoy. Rick's breath fogged inside the cab, and frost crept along the windows, partially obscuring his view. The feeling of being watched, studied, and hunted gnawed at him with every heartbeat. He realized the highway wasn't just haunted. It manipulated reality, bending perception to trap truckers in a living nightmare. Survival meant ignoring what his eyes and mind insisted was real, and focusing on the faint glow of a distant break in the storm, the only path that might lead out alive. Through the swirling snow, Rick glimpsed a tall, dark shadow standing on the highway, completely still, yet emanating a presence that pressed against his mind. Its glowing eyes locked onto him, and the phantom convoy seemed to subtly drift closer, as if acknowledging the shadow's command. The whispers sharpened, almost forming words. The highway takes. The highway chooses. Every instinct screamed to swerve or brake, but the icy road offered no control. Rick realized the shadow wasn't just an observer. It was the highway's enforcer, ensuring that anyone who faltered became prey. The phantom trucks shifted subtly, forming a corridor, guiding him directly toward the shadow. Panic clawed at his chest, but a stubborn determination took hold. He focused on the faint glimmer of light far ahead, the only exit from this nightmare. Each heartbeat felt elongated, each second a test of nerve. As the highway, the phantoms, and the shadows seemed to conspire to break him before he could escape. Rick's tires skidded as the highway beneath him suddenly rose in jagged icy ridges, forcing his rig to bounce and swerve uncontrollably. The phantom convoy mirrored his every move, hemming him in, while the shadow figure remained fixed in the distance, its glowing eyes unblinking. The whispers became shrieks, echoing off the frozen landscape. "You belong to the highway. There is no escape." Every instinct screamed to stop, but the ice itself seemed alive, locking him onto the path. Frost formed along the edges of the windshield, freezing his vision in patches. The phantom trucks moved with eerie precision, forcing him down a corridor of snow and ice, a trap set to ensnare even the most skilled driver. Rick's mind raced. Panic wouldn't save him. He had to anticipate the highway's movements, treat the ice and shadows as a living opponent, and find the faint light ahead, the only real exit from the nightmare. The ice-bound highway wasn't just treacherous. It was alive, hunting, and patient. Rick spotted the faint glow of light ahead, promising escape from the nightmare of ice and shadows. He pushed the rig forward, tires skimming over the slick surface, but the light flickered and disappeared, replaced by endless darkness. The highway itself had shifted, snowdrifts forming new paths that led him deeper into the phantom convoy's control. The whispers now spoke in a chorus of menacing voices. There is no way out. The highway claims all. Every movement Rick made seemed anticipated. The shadow figure appeared closer, stretching unnaturally, as if absorbing the surrounding darkness. The phantom trucks glided silently alongside him, maintaining perfect alignment, ensuring he could not turn or retreat. Rick realized the icebound highway didn't just feed on fear. It toyed with drivers, bending reality to ensure they felt hopeless before the final strike. Summoning all his courage, he focused on what little he knew was real, the faint light in the distance. He refused to look at the phantoms or the shadow figure, knowing the highway's power thrived on distraction and fear. The wind intensified, whipping snow into a blinding wall that reduced visibility to mere feet. Rick struggled to keep the rig steady, each turn a battle against the blizzard that seemed alive, pushing him toward the phantom convoy. The shadow figure lingered ahead, frozen and unmoving, yet radiating an oppressive presence that made the air feel heavy and suffocating. Whispers became urgent, insistent. Turn back, or stay forever. The highway itself felt alive beneath him. Ice cracked and shifted as if testing his resolve, the phantom trucks maneuvering perfectly to keep him on the path. Rick's hands ached from gripping the wheel, sweat mixing with frost on his brow. He knew survival depended on ignoring everything unnatural around him, focusing solely on the distant glow, the only possible escape from this supernatural trap. Despite exhaustion, panic, and the blizzard's deadly grip, Rick forced himself forward. Every second brought him closer to a potential exit, and every misstep could be his last on the icebound highway. Suddenly, one of the phantom trucks moved forward, cutting directly in front of Rick's rig. The headlights glowed brighter than ever, illuminating nothing but swirling snow. The shadow figure seemed to pulse with energy, and the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. Follow, or perish. Rick slammed the brakes, tires skidding dangerously on the ice. But the phantom truck matched his every move, preventing him from overtaking or escaping. It was no longer just a specter. It was a predator, testing him, manipulating the environment, forcing fear into every thought. Rick's pulse raced, yet he realized panic would kill him. He focused on controlling the rig, reading the subtle cues of the ice and wind, predicting the phantom's movements. The distant glow remained ahead. Fragile, almost unreal. But it represented hope, the only way to break free from the highway's supernatural grip. Rick's hands ached, muscles screaming as he navigated the slippery highway. The phantom convoy pressed in from both sides, moving like sentient predators, while the shadow figure seemed to grow taller with every mile. The wind screamed in his ears, carrying the whispers of countless lost truckers. "You cannot leave. You belong." Through sheer focus and determination, Rick managed to steer his rig toward the distant glow. The snowstorm thinned slightly, revealing a narrow break in the highway, a path that felt like reality itself was bending back toward normalcy. Every step closer, however, was met with subtle resistance. Ice ridges shifted, snow drifts appeared, and the phantoms glided alongside him, forcing him to fight for every foot of progress. Finally, Rick took a deep breath, forcing himself to ignore the unnatural, focusing solely on the light. Each heartbeat felt like an eternity, but he knew he was approaching the threshold between the nightmare and the real world. With the faint glow ahead growing brighter, Rick pushed the rig forward with everything he had. The phantom convoy wavered, the shadow figure flickering like a candle about to go out. The whispers escalated one final time, a chorus of frustration and despair. "You cannot leave." Then, with a surge of resolve, Rick crossed the narrow break. The storm seemed to shatter around him. Ice ridges flattened, phantom trucks vanished into mist, and the shadow figure dissolved into the first light of dawn. Exhausted and trembling, Rick's rig rolled onto solid ground, the icebound highway behind him now silent and empty, leaving no evidence of the nightmarish ordeal. He took a moment to breathe, frost still clinging to his jacket, knowing that, although he had escaped, the memory of the phantom convoy and the shadow figure would haunt him forever. The highway had tested him, almost claimed him. But Rick had survived, a rare victory over the supernatural forces lurking in Alaska's frozen expanse. Tommy Diesel Harlow had driven the same route in Alaska for years, but the old train crossing near Eagle River had always given him an uneasy feeling. That night, the fog rolled in thicker than ever, swallowing the headlights of his rig and muting the sounds of the forest. As he approached the crossing, the warning lights began to flash, but no train sounded its horn. Suddenly, a deafening rumble filled the air, yet no train appeared. Tommy slammed on the brakes, the rig sliding slightly on the frost-covered road. Ahead, a phantom locomotive emerged from the mist, black as coal, eyes like lamps glowing red, moving without sound on rusty tracks that hadn't been used in decades. A voice hissed from the cab radio, static-laced and eerie. "Stop, or join us." Every instinct screamed danger, yet the crossing was directly ahead. Tommy realized he was facing something beyond normal perception, a supernatural force that had claimed truckers and locals alike. The fog thickened, lights flickered, and the rails seemed to stretch endlessly, trapping him in place. Survival meant thinking fast and acting faster, or becoming another story whispered along the frozen tracks. As Tommy's rig skidded slightly on the icy road, he noticed a figure standing atop the phantom locomotive. A tall engineer, face hidden beneath a soot-stained hat, hands gripping the controls with unnatural stillness. The engineer's eyes glowed faint red, reflecting the lights of the rig, unblinking, unfeeling, and terrifying. The fog carried a low metallic hum, almost like wailing from the steel rails themselves. Tommy could hear whispers through the radio again. "The crossing takes. The crossing keeps." The locomotive shifted unnaturally, gliding toward him with no sound of wheels on rails. Tommy realized the figure was controlling the train through a supernatural force, guiding it toward anyone foolish enough to approach the crossing at night. Panic rose, but his mind sharpened. He knew he had only seconds to decide between trying to outrun it or risking the crossing at full speed. Every instinct screamed the danger wasn't just in the train itself. It was in the entire crossing, alive and hunting, waiting for the next victim to become part of its ghostly engine. Tommy gritted his teeth, hands shaking, ready to act. As Tommy pressed the accelerator, he noticed something horrifying. The tracks beneath the locomotive seemed to shift and extend unnaturally, bending the terrain and creating impossible angles. The train wasn't confined to its rails. It glided silently across the ice and snow, pursuing him with supernatural precision. The whispers grew louder, overlapping with an eerie metallic screech. "You cannot leave. The crossing keeps all who linger." Every evasive maneuver Tommy attempted was countered by the phantom train's impossible movements. The fog thickened, obscuring the edges of the road, while the shadow of the train stretched and warped, almost as if it were reaching for him. His mind raced. He realized the crossing was alive, feeding on fear and trapping truckers in a spectral loop. Ignoring the natural instincts screaming to stop, Tommy focused on a faint glow far down the road, the only hint of escape. He knew that hesitation or panic would ensure the train claimed him. But with determination and quick thinking, he prepared for a daring maneuver that could free him from the cursed crossing. As Tommy pressed the accelerator, he noticed something horrifying. The tracks beneath the locomotive seemed to shift and extend unnaturally, bending the terrain and creating impossible angles. The train wasn't confined to its rails. It glided silently across the ice and snow, pursuing him with supernatural precision. The whispers grew louder, overlapping with an eerie metallic screech. "You cannot leave. The crossing keeps all who linger." Every evasive maneuver Tommy attempted was countered by the phantom train's impossible movements. The fog thickened, obscuring the edges of the road, while the shadow of the train stretched and warped, almost as if it were reaching for him. His mind raced. He realized the crossing was alive, feeding on fear and trapping truckers in a spectral loop. Ignoring the natural instinct screaming to stop, Tommy focused on a faint glow far down the road, the only hint of escape. He knew that hesitation or panic would ensure the train claimed him. But with determination and quick thinking, he prepared for a daring maneuver that could free him from the cursed crossing. As Tommy neared the bridge, the phantom train's lights flickered violently, creating brief flashes that revealed twisted, spectral images of truckers crushed under the engine, their faces frozen in silent screams. Each blink of the light seemed to pull him closer to the train's inevitable grasp, the shadows of the fog stretching longer with every second. The whispers escalated, overlapping into a deafening roar. The crossing keeps all who linger. There is no escape. His tires skidded on ice as the bridge approached, its railings coated in frost. The phantom locomotive shifted, gliding unnaturally, as if the entire crossing itself was alive, bending reality to trap him. Panic clawed at Tommy, but he forced himself to focus. The bridge was narrow, the only path to escape. Ignoring the phantoms, ignoring the whispering, he gripped the wheel tightly, determined to survive the supernatural trial. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the fog, marking the passage of time toward either salvation or eternal entrapment. Tommy's rig hit the icy surface of the bridge, tires slipping but holding just enough traction. The phantom locomotive hovered at the entrance, its red eyes glowing brighter as if sensing his determination. Shadows stretched across the bridge, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to crawl along the guardrails and road, attempting to block his path. The whispers were now a deafening chant. No one leaves. The crossing claims all. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the bridge offered no escape. Tommy focused solely on the faint light at the far end, a small circle of dawn beginning to pierce the fog. The phantom train swayed slightly, the spectral engineer leaning forward, as if preparing a final, deadly attempt to stop him. With hands frozen on the wheel, Tommy pressed forward inch by inch, ignoring the writhing shadows and the chilling fog. The bridge was narrow, the ice slick, and every moment carried the weight of death. Yet hope glimmered at the end, a fragile lifeline through the haunted crossing. Tommy was halfway across the bridge when the phantom locomotive rose slightly off the tracks, gliding directly toward him. The fog thickened into an almost solid wall, and twisted spectral forms lunged from the sides, reaching for the rig as if the crossing itself wanted to consume him. The whispers now screamed in unison. "You cannot leave. All who cross are ours." Every nerve in Tommy's body screamed to swerve or stop, but the bridge was too narrow. He realized the train's power was tied to the fear it instilled. Only by remaining focused and unshaken could he stand a chance. Ignoring the screaming phantoms, he gritted his teeth, steering toward the faint dawn light ahead. The phantom train swerved slightly, almost in mockery, but Tommy's determination remained unbroken. One final push, one last surge of courage, and he could escape the haunted crossing that had claimed so many before him. Tommy's rig fought against the slick ice, tires scraping for traction as the phantom locomotive followed relentlessly. The fog seemed to press in on him from all sides, the ghostly shapes of long-lost truckers and travelers swirling, almost tangible. Every heartbeat echoed with the whispers. "The crossing keeps. You cannot leave." He focused on the faint light growing at the far end of the bridge, a fragile promise of escape. With a surge of courage, Tommy accelerated toward the glow, ignoring the spectral hands that seemed to claw at his rig from the fog. The phantom train veered slightly, as if sensing he was slipping from its grasp, but the bridge itself had no room for it to block him entirely. Each second was a battle between fear and determination. And with every inch he gained, Tommy realized the only way to survive was to refuse to succumb to the crossing's supernatural influence. The exit was close, the dawn's light breaking through the fog, offering a final chance at freedom. The glow ahead grew brighter, yet the phantom train surged forward with unnatural speed, its red headlights cutting through the fog like blades of malice. The spectral engineer leaned forward, almost mocking Tommy's determination, while ghostly faces pressed from the mist, their silent screams echoing in his mind. Tommy's rig skidded slightly, ice shifting under the tires as the bridge seemed to stretch endlessly. He forced himself to ignore everything: the whispers, the shadows, the phantom train, focusing only on the light ahead. With each inch he gained, the fog began to thin, the spectral forms retreating slightly. The train swerved one final time, but Tommy's resolve held firm. He realized the crossing's power relied entirely on fear. By keeping his mind sharp and eyes on the exit, he could break the curse and survive, escaping the deadly grasp of the haunted crossing once and for all. With a final surge, Tommy's rig crossed the last icy stretch of the bridge. The fog shattered like glass, the spectral forms evaporating into the morning light. The phantom train slowed, then disappeared into mist, leaving only the sound of the wind and the crunch of ice under his tires. Tommy exhaled, frost clinging to his jacket, knowing he had narrowly escaped a supernatural death. The crossing now lay silent, seemingly abandoned. Yet the memory of the ghostly train and the cursed engineer would haunt him forever. He realized that only by confronting his fear and staying focused had he survived. A rare victory over the haunted crossing that had claimed so many before him. As the sun rose over the frozen landscape, he pressed on, the nightmare behind him, yet etched forever in his memory. The Alaska night was dark, the roads unforgiving. But for Tommy, the dawn represented life, survival, and the triumph of courage over fear. Jake Long-Haul Monroe was no stranger to late-night hauls through Alaska's frozen wilderness. But this night felt different. His dispatch had routed him along a less-traveled stretch of highway, notorious among locals for sudden blizzards and disappearing road signs. The dashboard clock ticked past midnight as fog began to creep across the ice, swallowing the taillights of distant vehicles. Suddenly, his CB radio crackled with static, followed by a low, distorted voice. "You shouldn't be here. The night watches." Jake's heart pounded. The road ahead seemed unnaturally dark, as if the highway itself was pulling him into an invisible corridor. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but a looming deadline and his stubborn pride forced him forward. The trees lining the road seemed to lean closer, shadows stretching unnaturally toward his headlights. As the rig's tires crunched over frost, Jake realized this wasn't just a night drive. Something alive and malevolent had taken notice, stalking him silently in the darkness. Survival would demand every ounce of focus and courage, because Alaska's night shift could claim even the most experienced drivers without warning. Minutes into the night, Jake noticed faint glowing eyes flickering in the fog, reflecting off patches of ice. At first, he thought it was wildlife, but the movement was too deliberate, following his every turn. The CB radio crackled again with whispered words. "You can't outrun. The night sees all." Panic surged as the rig skidded on black ice. The highway seemed to twist unnaturally, bends appearing where none existed, forcing him into a labyrinth of shadow and frost. The eyes in the fog multiplied, forming ghostly silhouettes of truckers who had vanished on this route over decades. Jake gritted his teeth, keeping his eyes on the dim glow of a distant checkpoint light, his only hope. Each moment became a test of nerve. each breath measured against the oppressive presence stalking him. A force that thrived on fear and hesitation. Survival depended not on speed, but on focus. A delicate balance between courage and instinct. Without warning, shadows began to coalesce along the highway. Jake realized the glowing eyes belonged to phantom trucks, spectral rigs appearing alongside him with headlights that cut through the fog like knives. They didn't make a sound, but their presence pressed against his rig, forcing him to maintain perfect alignment. The whispers escalated. The highway keeps. Jake swerved to avoid one phantom, only to find another in perfect sync, a relentless pursuit through the icy night. The road seemed alive, every patch of frost and snow a trap designed to entangle his tires and slow his progress. His mind raced. Fear would kill him faster than ice ever could. He realized that the only way out was to ignore the phantoms completely, treat the night as a mechanical opponent, and focus on the checkpoint light, the fragile beacon of reality in a supernatural highway maze. A sudden gust of wind howled through the frozen trees, carrying with it a chorus of whispers and faint screams, echoing across the highway. Jake gripped the wheel as the rig skidded slightly on black ice. The phantom convoy remained perfectly aligned, pressing in like predators circling their prey. The whispers became voices he recognized from missing truckers, chillingly familiar. Turn back. The night claims all. Every instinct screamed to stop. But Jake knew that hesitation would be fatal. He forced himself to ignore the eerie voices, focusing on the distant checkpoint light flickering through the fog. The night was alive, testing him with wind, ice, and spectral pressure. Yet he pressed forward, determined to survive the Alaska night shift terror. The highway ahead narrowed unexpectedly, walls of ice forming on either side, funneling Jake's rig into a tunnel-like corridor. The phantom trucks mirrored his every maneuver, perfectly synchronized, as if the ice itself had become a living conduit for the supernatural convoy. The whispers grew louder, echoing inside the rig's cab. No one leaves. All who enter are claimed. Jake's tires scraped against the frozen walls as he fought for control. The tunnel seemed endless, the ice shimmering with ghostly reflections of drivers who had disappeared before him. Panic clawed at him, but he forced himself to focus. One wrong move, and he would become another lost soul etched into the frozen highway forever. Inside the rig's side mirrors, Jake glimpsed something that made his blood run cold. Ghostly images of himself driving, but with hollow eyes and twisted expressions, mimicking his every movement. The phantom convoy pressed on, surrounding him, the road twisting unnaturally, as if the highway was reflecting his own fear back at him. The voices whispered one last warning. The night watches. The night keeps. Jake forced himself to breathe, focusing on the faint checkpoint light ahead. He realized the supernatural threat fed on hesitation and panic, so he kept his mind clear, hands steady on the wheel. Every inch forward was a victory, and the only way out was to trust his instincts and break free from the spectral highway. The checkpoint light grew closer, but the phantom convoy tightened its spectral grip, gliding beside him like a predator closing in on prey. The wind howled, the ice cracked under tires, and the road seemed to tilt unnaturally, threatening to throw him off into the snow-laden forest. The whispers became deafening. No one escapes. The night devours. Jake's focus never wavered. He aimed the rig toward the faint light, accelerating, tires gripping the ice just enough to maintain control. The phantom truck swerved in eerie coordination, but he refused to yield. The night shifted and twisted around him, testing his courage and skill until finally, the light was just ahead. A fragile beacon promising freedom. As Jake crossed the last curve, the fog began to thin, and the spectral convoy wavered, its forms losing cohesion. The whispers softened, fading into the wind. You may leave. This time, the ice beneath his tires remained treacherous, but the path forward was clear. The phantom trucks flickered, stretching unnaturally before dissolving entirely, and the shadows of missing truckers retreated into the mist. Jake felt the first real sense of relief, though exhaustion weighed heavily. He realized the night had tested every nerve, every instinct, and every ounce of courage he possessed. The first rays of sunlight touched the frozen trees and ice, illuminating the highway in pale gold. Jake's rig rolled steadily forward, leaving the phantom convoy behind. The fog had lifted, revealing a serene yet haunting landscape. The night's terror, now a chilling memory. He exhaled, frost clinging to his jacket and face, knowing he had survived the Alaska night shift terror. The ghosts of the highway may never release their hold completely, but his courage had earned him passage through the most haunted stretch of the frozen route. Jake reached the checkpoint, safe at last. The night had tested him beyond imagination. Spectral trucks, ghostly engineers, shifting ice tunnels, and whispers that clawed at the mind. Though daylight now surrounded him, he knew the memory of the night shift terror would linger forever, etched in his mind like frost on the windshield. The highway lay calm, deceptively normal. Yet he knew the shadows of the night would watch again for the next driver foolish enough to cross in the dark. Jake's survival was a testament to courage, focus, and the will to face the unknown and emerge alive. He shifted gears and drove onward, leaving the frozen nightmare behind, but carrying its chilling lessons with him forever. Ben's icebreaker Turner had driven Alaska's highways for over a decade, but this particular route had a reputation that even veterans avoided. A lonely stretch through dense forests and frozen valleys, where GPS signals often vanished and fog settled like a living entity. The night was bitterly cold, the rig's exhaust forming thick clouds in the moonlight, while the road ahead seemed endless. Minutes into the journey, the CB radio crackled with static before a distorted voice whispered, "Turn back, or the highway will keep you forever." Ben's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The trees pressed in closer, shadows stretching toward the rig as if the forest itself were alive. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but his deadline and stubbornness pushed him forward. Something about the way the fog swirled unnaturally suggested that the highway had become a living trap, hunting for the next driver bold enough to venture into its heart. As Ben drove deeper into the forest, he noticed shapes moving between the trees, glowing faintly with red and white eyes. At first, he thought it was wildlife, but their movements were deliberate, tracking his every turn. The CB radio crackled again, filled with faint whispers. "The highway watches, all who enter must pay." Panic surged as the road twisted unnaturally, creating blind corners that hadn't been there moments before. Each blink of his headlights revealed ghostly silhouettes of truckers who had vanished years before, their faces frozen in terror, pressed against the bark of the trees. Ben forced himself to focus on the faint glimmer of a rest stop ahead, his only hope. Every second was a test of nerve, every mile a struggle against the living terror of the haunted highway. Suddenly, a shadowy figure on a snow-dusted motorcycle appeared in the middle of the road. Its headlight was dim, but red-tinged, and the rider's face was obscured by a dark helmet. It did not move, yet Ben felt it was controlling the highway around him, forcing bends and icy patches into his path. The CB radio whispered again, "You cannot leave. The highway claims all? Every swerve Ben made was anticipated by the phantom rider. The road ahead twisted impossibly, forming curves that defied physics. The highway itself seemed to shift under him, a frozen labyrinth designed to test fear and courage. Ben realized survival required total mental clarity, ignoring the phantom and focusing solely on the faint lights of the rest stop glowing in the distance. One misstep, one hesitation, and he could join the vanished souls trapped forever along this haunted stretch. As Ben pushed forward, a thick, unnatural fog rolled in, swallowing the road and obscuring the forest entirely. It moved like liquid, curling around the rig, pressing against the tires and mirrors. The whispers returned, now louder and more urgent. "The highway keeps. You cannot escape." Through the mist, he glimpsed shapes. Truckers frozen mid-drive. Spectral rigs gliding alongside, their headlights cutting through the fog like knives. Every curve seemed sharper, every patch of ice more treacherous, as if the road itself had become a maze designed to trap the living. Ben's pulse raced, but he forced himself to focus on the dim glow of a distant checkpoint light, the only tangible anchor in this nightmare. He gripped the wheel, ignoring the phantom sounds and looming shadows, knowing that the only way to survive was to trust his instincts and push forward. The highway ahead seemed to twist impossibly, turning in angles that defied physics. Ben's tires skidded on thin ice, scraping against frost-covered guardrails. Shadows flickered in the fog, forming grotesque faces of missing truckers and travelers who had vanished along this cursed route. The CB radio crackled violently. "Hurry, or join us forever." Every instinct screamed to stop, yet stopping meant surrendering. He leaned into every turn, forcing the rig to respond perfectly. The spectral motorcycle from earlier appeared again, hovering beside him, mirroring every movement. The road had become a test of fear, focus, and courage, each second weighing heavier than the last. Only by ignoring the illusions and trusting his own judgment could Ben hope to break free from the highway's supernatural grip. The trees closed in, forming an ice tunnel that seemed to stretch endlessly, walls glinting with frozen reflections of spectral truckers. Ben's rig skidded slightly, tires squealing as the corridor narrowed, forcing precise control. The phantom motorcycle glided ahead, its dim light reflecting off the ice like warning signals from the dead. The whispers now became almost unbearable. "All who enter are claimed." Every patch of ice threatened to throw him off, but Ben refused to look at the spectral figures surrounding him. His mind had to remain sharp. Hesitation would mean death. Inch by inch, he advanced, focusing solely on the faint checkpoint light ahead, the fragile promise of escape from the haunted highway. Suddenly, more spectral rigs appeared, forming a convoy around Ben's truck, their headlights cutting through the fog like blades. The road ahead narrowed further, creating a suffocating corridor of ice, shadow, and supernatural presence. The whispers screamed, "The highway claims all." Each swerve had to be perfect. The phantom rigs mirrored every move, seeming to anticipate his every action. The fog thickened into walls, pressing against the rig as if to crush it. Ben realized that the only way to survive was to ignore the phantoms entirely, focus on the checkpoint light, and keep driving forward no matter the terror surrounding him. Ben gritted his teeth and accelerated toward the faint light of the checkpoint, ignoring the spectral convoy. The fog seemed to resist, swirling into hands and faces that clawed at the rig's tires and mirrors. Every heartbeat echoed with whispers of the lost. "You cannot leave. The highway keeps." The checkpoint light grew brighter, the fog thinning, and spectral forms began to waver. Ben pressed on, determined to survive the haunted stretch that had claimed countless drivers before him. Each meter gained felt like a victory against the supernatural forces seeking to trap him forever. The fog finally began to break, revealing a calm, snow-covered highway under the moonlight. The phantom convoy dissolved entirely, leaving only the sound of tires crunching on ice. Ben exhaled, frost clinging to his jacket, realizing he had survived the supernatural ordeal. Though daylight would not come for some time, the highway seemed normal again, deceptively calm, as if nothing had happened. Yet he knew the shadows of the night would always linger in memory, waiting for the next driver brave or foolish enough to cross this haunted stretch. Finally, Ben reached the checkpoint, alive but forever changed. The night had tested him. Spectral rigs, ghostly figures, impossible ice tunnels, and whispers that clawed at his mind. The highway lay calm, snow sparkling under the first pale light of dawn, yet he knew the night would return for the next traveler. Ben's survival was proof that courage, focus, and refusal to succumb to fear could overcome the Alaska highway's darkest secrets. He shifted gears and pressed onward, leaving the haunted stretch behind, but carrying its chilling lessons forever. Derek "Blizzard" Hayes had driven the notorious Alaska Ice Road for years, hauling heavy loads across bridges of ice and frozen rivers. But tonight felt different. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the wind sliced across the frozen landscape, howling through the rig's cab. His route was a shortcut, a path even seasoned drivers avoided, promising both speed and danger. As the rig's tires crunched over frost, a sudden glow appeared on the horizon, not like headlights, but a pulsing red light hovering above the ice. Derek's CB radio buzzed violently, static filling the cab before a faint, chilling voice whispered, "The ice watches. The ice remembers." His grip tightened on the wheel. The ice road was unforgiving, but tonight it felt alive, almost sentient. Every shadow and shimmer on the frozen surface seemed to move with intention, testing his focus and courage. This was no ordinary night shift. It was a battle against the unknown, a nightmare waiting to claim him like so many drivers before. As Derek drove closer, the red glow pulsated in rhythm with his heartbeat, reflecting eerily off the ice. Every crack and creak of the frozen river under his tires sounded amplified, echoing across the empty wilderness. The CB radio crackled again, carrying whispers that seemed almost alive. "You should not be here. The ice will claim you." From the corner of his eyes, Derek caught movements in the snowbanks lining the ice road. Shadowy figures gliding just out of reach, their forms distorted, inhuman. Panic threatened to take hold, but he knew that hesitation could be fatal on this treacherous ice. Survival required perfect focus, nerves of steel, and an unyielding will to keep moving forward. Suddenly, the ice beneath Derek's rig began to groan and crack in long, jagged lines. The red glow intensified, and the shadows from the snowbanks seemed to reach out like claws. His headlights illuminated ghostly faces, frozen mid-scream in the swirling snow, spectral images of drivers who had vanished on the ice road over decades. The CB radio carried one final chilling warning: stop or sink forever. Every nerve in Derek's body screamed to halt, but stopping could be just as deadly. He leaned forward, gripping the wheel, guiding the rig through the treacherous ice fissures. The highway wasn't just haunted, it was alive, testing his courage and resolve with every inch of frozen asphalt. Out of the swirling snow, a spectral semi-truck appeared, its headlights glowing a deep crimson, sliding silently across the ice toward Derek. Its cab was empty, yet Derek felt its presence pressing against him, a silent threat that followed his every movement. The CB radio hissed, "Join us. The ice takes all." The frozen river seemed to narrow, directing Derek toward the phantom truck. Every move he made was anticipated, every swerve mirrored. The ice beneath groaned ominously, threatening to break apart. Derek realized the only chance to survive was to ignore the spectral presence and focus solely on the distant glow marking the edge of the ice road. A fragile lifeline in a sea of supernatural terror. A sudden blizzard erupted, reducing visibility to nearly zero. Snow whipped across the ice, forming walls that seemed alive, twisting into shapes that resembled skeletal hands and faces. The phantom truck glided beside him, perfectly synchronized, silent yet oppressive. The whispers rose again. The ice remembers. The ice claims. Derek fought to maintain control, tires barely gripping the frozen surface. The red glow of the horizon was the only constant, a reminder that the path to survival lay forward, not back. Each second was a battle against wind, ice, and a malevolent presence that seemed determined to claim him for the frozen highway. Derek's rig finally approached the infamous ice bridge, a stretch of frozen river that spanned nearly half a mile, notorious for vanishing mid-winter under treacherous snowstorms. The wind howled like a chorus of tortured spirits, each gust carrying whispers that seemed to come from beneath the ice itself. As the headlights cut through the blizzard, Derek glimpsed the surface of the bridge. Jagged cracks that glowed faintly red from some unnatural source beneath the ice. The phantom truck remained in his peripheral vision, gliding smoothly on the frozen expanse as if mocking his every careful maneuver. Shadows danced around the bridge, elongated and distorted, forming shapes that resembled drivers who had disappeared over the years, their spectral forms pressed against the ice, as if warning him, or perhaps inviting him to join them. Derek's pulse thundered in his ears. Every sway of the rig felt like a battle against gravity and something far older, a sentient force within the ice itself. He remembered the words from the CB radio, distorted and chilling. Step wrong, and sink into eternity. But Derek couldn't stop. One misstep, one hesitation, and the ice could fracture, plunging him into the freezing abyss below. He leaned into each curve, calculating every movement, aware that the spectral truck mirrored his motions exactly. The bridge seemed to narrow with every inch, the wind now pressing against the rig as though trying to push it off course. And then he saw it. A red figure standing in the center of the bridge, motionless, eyes glowing like coals. It was humanoid, but impossibly tall, its presence radiating malice. Derek held his breath and forced the rig forward, every nerve screaming, knowing that the moment he faltered, the bridge and the entity would claim him forever. Time seemed to stretch as he crossed the final stretch, each second an eternity, each breath a reminder that the ice road did not forgive mistakes. And as he reached the other side, the red glow vanished. The phantom truck faded into the blizzard, leaving only the sound of crunching snow beneath his tires and the echo of whispers carried away by the wind. The blizzard intensified as Derek pushed forward, his headlights cutting through the swirling snow like knives in a sea of white. Every creak of the ice beneath his rig seemed amplified, echoing across the frozen river. A reminder that the ice road could collapse under the slightest misstep. The spectral truck from before remained in his peripheral vision, now joined by faint, ghostly outlines of rigs that had vanished decades ago, sliding silently across the ice. Their headlights glowed dimly red, like eyes staring into his soul. Then he saw it, a figure standing directly in the center of the highway ahead. Its form was humanoid, but the proportions were wrong, elongated, almost skeletal. The icy wind howled around it, carrying whispers that sounded eerily like the voices of lost drivers. Derek froze for a moment, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The CB radio buzzed violently, static overlaying a chilling message. "The ice will not let you leave. You belong here now." Panic threatened to take over, but Derek forced himself to breathe steadily, focusing on the distant red glow that marked the path forward. As he carefully navigated closer, the figure didn't move, yet it seemed to shift with the rig's motion, always appearing directly in front of the tires as if it were testing his nerve, daring him to swerve. The phantom rigs moved in perfect synchrony, herding him toward the center of the frozen nightmare. With every second, the ice beneath began to groan louder, cracks widening ominously. Derek felt the cold not just on his skin, but inside his bones, as if the highway itself were leeching his warmth, his life force. He remembered every story he had heard about drivers vanishing without a trace, swallowed by ice, fog, or some malevolent force lurking along this cursed stretch. Summoning every ounce of courage, Derek pressed forward, his rig bouncing over the icy ruts, tires squealing in defiance of the supernatural pull. He refused to look away, refused to acknowledge the apparitions except as obstacles. And slowly, inch by painstaking inch, he began to cross the stretch where many had vanished, surviving purely on focus, willpower, and determination. The blizzard had reached a deafening intensity. Snowflakes whipped against Derek's windshield, thick and sharp as shards of glass, while the frozen river beneath his rig seemed to shift and tremble with every mile. The red glow in the distance pulsed, almost alive, reflecting eerily off the ice cracks that zigzagged unpredictably across the road. Derek realized with growing terror that this stretch of highway wasn't just haunted. It reacted to fear, feeding on hesitation and doubt. From the swirling fog, spectral rigs emerged, sliding along the ice like predatory wolves. Their headlights glowed dim red, cutting through the storm and illuminating ghostly faces pressed against the frozen cabs. Every movement Derek made was mirrored perfectly by the phantoms, herding him toward an ever-narrowing corridor of ice. His heart pounded so violently he could feel it in his throat, each beat a reminder that one slip could send him plunging into the freezing abyss below. And then he saw the cracks widen, forming jagged rifts that split the ice like monstrous jaws. The skeletal humanoid appeared again, taller and more menacing, standing directly in his lane. The CB radio screamed with static and distorted voices. "Surrender! The ice claims all!" Derek's hands were numb, but he forced them to grip the wheel, focusing entirely on the faint glow of the checkpoint just beyond the horizon. Each inch was a battle, tires skidding on ice, the phantom rigs pressing in, shadows flickering like knives at the edges of his vision. His only option was to maintain unflinching focus, ignore the apparitions, and trust his instincts. Seconds stretched like hours as he drove, the abyss looming beneath, the storm howling around him. And slowly, mercifully, the spectral rigs faltered, their forms flickering in the wind. The skeletal figure lingered for a moment longer, then dissolved into the storm, leaving only the sound of crunching ice under his tires and the dim red glow guiding him toward survival. After what felt like an eternity, Derek finally glimpsed the faint outline of the checkpoint, a solitary cabin perched at the edge of the ice road, its lights flickering weakly through the storm. The red glow that had haunted him since the beginning now seemed to pulse in warning, hovering low over the ice as though measuring his fear and resolve. Every shadow on the frozen river danced like the specters of vanished drivers, their faces twisted in silent screams, their ghostly rigs sliding alongside him, relentless and omnipresent. The skeletal humanoid figure appeared once more, standing at the midpoint of the narrowing ice corridor. It didn't move, yet its presence pressed against Derek's mind, whispering doubts, threats, and terror. The CB radio sputtered, carrying an unearthly chorus of voices. "Turn back, or join us forever." Derek's vision tunneled, nerves screaming for him to halt, but he forced every muscle to obey his will. The ice below groaned violently, cracks widening unpredictably, and the wind roared like a living predator. With painstaking precision, he guided the rig, every turn, every inch measured against the forces pressing in from all sides. The phantom rigs mirrored his actions, attempting to herd him off the ice and into oblivion. Yet he refused to give them the satisfaction. As he reached the final stretch, the red glow began to recede, fading into the horizon. The skeletal figure dissolved into mist, and the spectral rigs slowly vanished into the storm, leaving Derek alone with only the crunch of tires on ice. Exhausted but alive, he realized that the ice road had tested him, his courage, focus, and sheer willpower. And he had survived the unthinkable. Finally, Derek's rig rolled onto the solid ground beyond the ice bridge, snow crunching under the tires in the stillness after the storm. The blizzard had subsided, leaving a surreal calm. The frozen river reflecting the pale light of dawn, softening the terror of the night. Yet Derek knew he wasn't entirely free. The ice road's nightmare lingered in memory, an unshakable presence that would haunt every journey ahead. He exhaled, sweat and frost mixing on his face, recalling the relentless ghostly rigs, the skeletal humanoid, the shifting ice, and the pulsing red glow. Each moment had been a test against fear, instinct, and supernatural malevolence. The road had tried to claim him, but his focus and courage had turned the tide. Even as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, Derek knew countless others had not been as lucky. As he drove away from the cursed stretch, the frozen river stretched silently behind him, a reminder of the night that could have swallowed him forever. The whispers and shadows of the ice road would remain, waiting for the next driver to challenge its deadly expanse. Derek's rig disappeared into the morning mist, but the legend of the Alaska Ice Road nightmare lived on, an eternal test of courage and survival. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time. And just like that, another journey into the darkest, coldest edges of the world comes to an end. From ghostly rigs of unfrozen highways, to voices whispering through the CB radio, to truckers disappearing into storms that no map can explain. These stories remind us of one chilling truth. In Alaska, the road isn't just dangerous. Sometimes it's alive. Every mile is a gamble. Every night is a test. And every driver who heads north believes they'll be the one who makes it back. But not everyone does. If these stories shook you, if you felt that cold creeping up your spine, then you're exactly where you belong. More terrifying true stories are coming. Darker, stranger, more disturbing. Before you leave, answer this in the comments. Which story haunted you the most? Story 1 or Story 10? I'm reading every comment. And if you want to keep going deeper into the unknown, click on the next video appearing on screen. I dare you to watch it in the dark. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.